Right, I'm going to talk to you a little bit this morning about Tabernacles, because the Christian celebration of harvest comes from the Jewish celebration of Tabernacles or Sukkot. And at this time of year, they not only gathered to celebrate the end of harvest, when they gathered their crops in from the field and their fruit from the orchard, but they also remembered the way that God had protected them and provided for them when they lived in the desert or the wilderness, when they'd escaped from Egypt. And that story should be really fresh in our minds, having just done it over the last summer. And so in particular, they gave thanks for three things during the Festival of Tabernacles: shelter, water, and food, all of which God provided for them in the wilderness when they had escaped from Egypt. So this morning, at our harvest celebration, we are going to thank God for all that we have and all that he provides, for food, for water, for shelter, just as the Israelites experienced wandering in the desert. And I just wondered, has anybody ever thought about what they might have slept in, the Israelites, when they were in the desert after they had escaped from Egypt? I'm not sure whether we've probably given much thought to this, but actually they used to create temporary homes or huts out of dry palms and branches. And so during Tabernacles, the first thing that they do as part of their celebration, and Jesus would have done this as well, is that they would build their own hut or shelter, which they would sleep in for 7 nights. And many Jews still do this. So we have our own tabernacle here today. And the tabernacle or tent reminds us that God protects us and he provides for us, just as he protected and provided the Jewish people as they wandered in the desert. Now, we're not going to sleep under this for 7 nights, but we are going to have it up for the next week, and you're going to preach in it tonight, Verity. But what we need to do is finish the tabernacle. So what I'd like to do is invite anybody who's young at heart to come up and help. What we need is this greenery woven into the sides of our tabernacle. Okay? Come up and start helping. And while you do that, I'm going to talk to those people who are not coming up a little bit more about what this might involve. You can come up as well if you're young at heart. I'm looking at you 3 as well. Okay. Amazing. Let's start weaving our tabernacle in. So in the Bible, festivals were all about remembering and giving thanks, and they were basically an excuse for a party. And so 3 times a year, all of the Jewish people came and descended on Jerusalem for Passover, which is our Easter, for Pentecost and Tabernacles. And you can read all about, I'm fighting the noise from behind me. You can read about all of these festivals in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And remembering the past and giving thanks for God's faithfulness is a really important part of a Jewish festival. Festivals are not for God, they are for us. Festivals were created so that we could get together and celebrate and give thanks, and also to remember all that God has done for us. So, the word Sukkot means booths, and thousands of Jews would come from far and wide to Jerusalem 3 times a year, and they would camp on the hillsides around Jerusalem in their own little huts and shelters. And they would sleep under the stars for 7 nights, and they would lie in bed and they'd look up at the stars at night, and it would remind them of their ancestors who used to look up at the stars when they were in the wilderness for those 40 years after they had escaped from Egypt. Jewish festivals are very much about experiencing, which is why everybody is getting involved today and why we're all, most of us are up out of our seats. So they had no permanent home at all, and they were entirely dependent on God during this period. And God sheltered them with his presence, with a cloud during the day and a pillar of fire during the night. And so the purpose of the Festival of Tabernacles is to give thanks. It's much more than just a harvest celebration. It's an opportunity to recognize God's provision and his faithfulness. Now, we are going to stand and sing while they finish off the tabernacle. And during this song, we'd really encourage you, if you wanted to be able to go and give to the work of Hounslow Food Box through our cash donations or our cashless giving, the white box at the back there. So this is an opportunity during the next song to give financially to the work of the food box. Would you join me in standing as we sing together? Thank you. Do take a seat, and Zeb is going to come up to read for us. Let me just get you a microphone. So this reading, do you want to tell us where it's from?
Food, Exodus 16, verses 1 to 4.
Great.
The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into the desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather food for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions." Thank you.
This is the word of the Lord. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You want to sit down? Okay. So God's people set out, having escaped from Egypt. They were in the wilderness for 40 years. And literally, this is not going to come as a surprise, there was no food in the wilderness. Certainly not enough to feed that number of people. So they lost faith quite quickly, and they started getting annoyed about not having enough food. In the staff team, we call that hangry. When we're hungry, we start becoming hangry. So that's what happened. A lot of hangry people in the desert. And so God sent them food, and he sent quails, which were like birds, every evening, and something called manna in the mornings. And the quails, these were birds, they were delicious meat, and they flew about 3 feet off the ground, so they were quite easy to catch, I assume. And it was called manna because in Hebrew, the meaning is, what is that? So obviously this is not something that they had seen before. So the manna came every morning and with a double portion at the weekend, and the quail came every evening, and God gave them just enough for each day. And if they tried to sort of store it up and keep a bit for a rainy day, perhaps an extra portion if somebody was super hungry, it got moldy. So in the New Testament, Jesus says he is the bread of life. He says it in John's Gospel. And he says our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, but they died and the food only lasted a short amount of time before they got hungry again. And unlike the manna that kept you full for a few hours, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life." And so he's comparing himself to the manna from heaven that sustained and kept the Israelites alive for 40 years in the wilderness. And so one of the things that Jesus enjoyed at the Festival of Tabernacles was eating, just like we enjoy eating at any time of celebration and festival, recognizing that God had provided for all of their needs. Now, we've had a delivery of manna this morning, and I feel like you just sensed that you knew that there was going to be food. Did you know that there was going to be food? Is that why you're enjoying it? So we've had a delivery of manna. It's manna from Hen Corner, which ups the stakes slightly more. And Sarah, would you like to help me? If you'd like some manna this morning, you can come up and get some manna. It's in the shape of a cross because Jesus said he is the bread of life. So children, if you'd like to come up, you are very welcome. If you're not, I'm going to have some. So it'll all go one way or the other. Come and get some manna. And while you're eating it, you can remember that it's down there. It's down there. That's it. You're going to go and get some? My gosh, I'm not interested. I am. There we go. So while they are eating their own manna, what we are going to do is we're going to stand and sing our next song. And it's during this song, once they finish eating, that if you've brought food with you, do come up and place it into the tabernacle. So shall we stand together?
Exodus chapter 17, verses 1 to 6. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock of Horeb, strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel.
Thank you so much. It's a jug of water. Now, food wasn't the only thing that the Israelites grumbled about. They also got really thirsty. And there wasn't much water in the desert. They got annoyed with Moses because they didn't have enough water. And so God tells Moses to go over and use his staff, the same staff that had held back the waters of the Red Sea when they had crossed, in order to be able to produce water from the rock. So at the Festival of Tabernacles, they remembered that Moses striking the rock and the water gushing out, and it reminded them, as it should remind us, that God provides for our needs. And so one of the ways that they did this at the festival and remembered this was that the high priest would carry a pitcher, which was obviously much grander than what I've got, which is just a jug. But he carried a pitcher from the pool of Siloam all the way up to the high altar. And then he poured it all over the altar. And there were sort of, it flowed from the altar all the way down, and it was a symbol of God blessing the rain, so for the harvest, but also a sense of refreshment and rebirth for the people as well. And so during the Feast of Tabernacles, it was also this time when Jesus stood up in the middle of the temple courts, and he said to everyone, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me, and let anyone who believes in me drink." So it was at Tabernacles that Jesus said that he is the water that means that we'd never thirst again. So I'm going to ask you to help me in a minute, okay? I know. So we're going to do this. We're going to pour some water. And so Jesus pointed to the special water, and he said that he was the living water. And he pointed to the manna that God had provided, and he said he was the bread of life. Now, I can't recreate water gushing from a rock this morning, shocker, but I'm going to pour this into this jug, into the bowl. And when we do this, we're going to be reminded that Jesus said he was the living water, that anybody who comes to Jesus will never be hungry or thirsty again. I feel like I've made it out to be more exciting than this is going to be. I've got to be honest. Okay, who's going to help me? Ben, can somebody hold the bowl for me? You hold the bowl for me? There we go. Oh, are you? I'll tell you what, you can put your fingers in while I pour it. Hold it steady, Ben. So this is how they did it with a bit more ceremony. Oh, you're putting all your hands in. Okay. That's it. Oh, look, it's going everywhere. There we go. There we go. So when they did this, this was at the point where Jesus said, "I am the living water." Thank you, guys. You can take your hands out now. And I'm going to put it on the table. Thank you. I'm going to put it on the table. There we go. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, you can go back into the tabernacle. Okay. So the Feast of Tabernacles is the foundation of what we celebrate at harvest. And it comes from the Jewish festival, which not only just celebrates the harvest, but also God's provision to the people while they were in the wilderness. And they slept in shelters and in tents and they ate manna from heaven, and they drank water that gushed out of the rock. And that's the reason while we have been celebrating today shelter, water and food. And I'm sure that you have stories to tell of when God has provided and looked after your needs. So harvest is a time when we remember and then celebrate and share those stories with others of the times that God has provided for us. That we give thanks and worship a God who loves us, who cares for us and provides for us. So we are now going to stand together and sing. Why don't you join me? Thank you.